What we saw was the strength and resilience of the American democracy, and we saw it in action. And the American people proved once again that democracy is who we are.
We've accomplished more than anybody thought possible 4 years ago, but we've got so much more to do, and I have only begun to fight.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Donald Trump announces he's running for president in 2024 as Republicans weigh their options following their resounding defeat in the midterm elections. Hello and welcome to Inside America with me, Ghida Fakhry. As former President Donald Trump made his widely anticipated announcement on Tuesday, the Republican leadership in the U.S. Congress continued to grapple with the results of the midterm elections, with Democrats retaining control of the Senate and Republicans expected to gain a very slim majority in the House of Representatives. Recriminations within the Republican Party continued, with many of the candidates endorsed by Trump, including 4 who ran for the position of Secretary of State in key battleground states, losing to their Democratic rivals. The Democratic Party succeeded in blocking a group of Trump-allied Republicans who still denied Joe Biden won the presidency legitimately in 2020 and who, had they been elected, would be overseeing elections in key battleground states in 2024. The Democratic Association of Secretaries of State invested heavily in these races, raising around $30 million during the election cycle, 7.5 times the amount the committee raised in 2018 and 2020 combined. Meanwhile, in an effort to defy a subpoena to testify before the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, Trump sued the committee, arguing that, quote, no president or former president has ever been compelled to do so. Trump has refused to comply with the committee's subpoena, which required him to appear for a deposition starting January 14th. So what do Trump's prospects for 2024 look like? Is the Republican Party ready to part ways with the former president, despite his solid MAGA base, or will it be obliged to yield to Trump? Joining me now is Ambassador Gordon Sondland, who testified at Donald Trump's first impeachment hearing in November 2019. He was fired from his position as U.S. ambassador to the EU at the end of those hearings in February 2020. His new book is entitled The Envoy: Mastering the Art of Diplomacy with Trump and the World. Ambassador Sondland, there is a lot of finger-pointing going on right now within the Republican Party following the poor performance of GOP candidates in the midterms. Many, as you know, are blaming Donald Trump, your former boss. Who do you hold accountable for the party's current predicament?
Well, I think each candidate bears their own responsibility for their win and their loss. In this case, I think a lot of the candidates that lost were election deniers and questioned the outcome of the 2020 election. While I personally think there were irregularities, there was some voter fraud, there always is in every election. It was a de minimis amount, as the courts ruled. And President Biden is the legitimate president of the United States, and we should have moved on long ago. And I think that had a big role in turning away some of the candidates that ran for the various offices.
Today, though, a lot of the Republican leadership is still hedging its bet, but some are saying that Trump may be the problem within the Republican Party. Is it fair, though, to blame it all on Trump when he clearly gave voice to a segment of the party, a right-wing part of the party that already existed long before he came on the scene?
Well, I have a more nuanced answer. I was supportive of President Trump, the good, the bad, and the ugly, from the day he came down the escalator until January 6th. I thought he did a lot of good things. The policies that I was instructed to deploy in Europe, many of them were very effective. I wish President Biden had continued some of them. But January 6th changed everything for me. All of the things that he did prior to January 6th, none of which I thought amounted to an impeachable offense, I thought should have been handled at the ballot box, which they were. He was defeated by now President Biden. So to get back to your original question, yes, I think he did play a role in selecting candidates that took, that took on this election denial mantra, and I think the voters weren't buying it.
Well, you say January 6th was a clear turning point for you, a red line, but not so for many of the Republicans on the Hill. They stood behind Trump even when they should have distanced themselves from him, you could argue. Political opportunism led them to support him even after what the whole world saw as an attempted insurrection, the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Shame on them. Look, at one of the things I learned as the ambassador in Europe is that fledgling democracies and autocracies that would like to become democracies look at us for what I call the way we turn over the keys here in the United States. You know, the new elected president goes to the White House and, makes nice with the old president. They hate each other, but they still make nice. They ride in together. They participate in the inaugural celebration, and they leave a note in the drawer for their successor. And all of those things, while they sound very, very sort of show busy, are very, very important signals that we do things peacefully and not at the point of a gun.
But how much of a mistake, though, did Republicans make, especially those in the Senate, when they had the opportunity to indict him following his second impeachment hearing after January 6th, and they simply did not?
I thought up until January 6th, nothing that he had done was indictable. I thought January 6th was indictable. I still am appreciative of the role that I had as the U.S. ambassador to the EU. I was appreciative of many of the policies that President Trump had, but I would like to see one of the 6 or 7 or 8 very qualified candidates who are talking about running for the presidency in 2024 take those policies forward. I do not want to see President Trump run for re-election again.
But can the party move away from Trump and his hardcore supporters? I mean, can it afford to fight him? Isn't it a bit too late now to fight him or try to ditch him? I mean, he is the kingmaker, isn't he?
Not at all. I think it's early, not late. It's very, very early. And if you see some polling that's out recently where they're doing hypothetical matchups between Trump and other primary contenders, there are some candidates, for example, Governor DeSantis appears to be polling ahead of President Trump. Now, that could change 100 times in the next few days or even the next few months, but today he's ahead.
Do you agree with those who say that Trump is the problem today within the Republican Party? You have Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of the key Democratic lawmakers on the January 6th Congressional Committee, saying that Republican senators had the opportunity to deal with this problem decisively, in his view. He says, quote, they needed to act on behalf of the country and they didn't. Donald Trump is the problem of the Republican Party and he may destroy the party. Has he already destroyed the party?
Well, in my book, The Envoy, which just came out, I point out that, the January 6th incident for me was unforgivable.
Beyond that, do you hold accountable the lawmakers who did not deal with this issue more decisively?
Well, listen, no one individual is responsible for all of the problems for a party or for a country, but I think President Trump contributed significantly to what was not initially a peaceful transfer of power. And for that, I blame him. And
how do you see the shifting dynamics within the party? Many people say it's a party right now that's in a bit of a mess. A segment of the party is clearly alienated. We saw that in the midterms. Independents are presumably not all that enthused by President or former President Trump. And without these two segments of the electorate, can Republicans win elections?
Well, the independents are the key. And the independents, I think, reacted negatively to 2 things. One was the Supreme Court abortion holding, and the other was the election denial. If I had to score them, I would say it was 25 or 30% the abortion issue, and the rest was probably the election denial. And Trump is the lead election denier. If we don't get behind our institutions when it comes to elections, that's the beginning of the crumbling of any democracy.
You mentioned institutions. There are rumblings that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, could move ahead with a possible indictment now that the midterms are behind us. Trump, though, is very good at casting himself as the victim of the establishment and the powers that be. Could it all end up galvanizing his base and helping him push forward that narrative if there is indeed an indictment?
It could, but it depends on what he's indicted for, how specific the indictment is, and whether it's viewed as a political indictment or a legal indictment. So I think in this case, the devil is in the details. The one thing I did notice, in this last election, the voters are not as dumb as people would like to believe they are. The voters were able to parse a lot of issues. And that's why, unfortunately, I'm a conservative Republican. I wanted desperately for the red wave, as they call it, to appear. But the voters looked at each candidate, at each race, and decided this person who is a Republican deserves to win office, and this person who is also a Republican, for a lot of detailed reasons, does not deserve to win office.
And you have a lot of people now in Congress and outside of Congress, including the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, warning that the U.S. could be on the edge of autocracy. They're blaming the Republican leadership for not doing more to rebut election denials and the threat of political violence more strongly early enough. So what happens next to the party?
I think we all need to take
a party that
breath.
many people say they can't live with. I mean, is it time for another party to take shape?
No. I think we all need to take a breath. I mean, Senator Schumer is famous for his hyperbole, and this is just more hyperbole. I think there's going to be a robust primary on the Republican side, which I think is good for the party.
According to the pollsters, 10% of the Republican Party's electorate are never Trumpers. Then you have about 40% who are always Trumpers, and some 50% are maybe Trumpers who voted for Trump once, perhaps twice, like his policies, but are open to supporting someone else. The question is who? Who is best positioned to take over the Republican Party?
Well, I think we're going to see that, Ghida, in the coming year. I think the political landscape, if we're sitting here exactly 1 year from today having this conversation, will be radically different. And a lot of that so-called base that Trump has may have gravitated to another candidate.
Is Mike Pence positioning himself? You worked with him. He just spoke out and called Trump's words on January 6th reckless. Is he a viable alternative? Could he take on Trump and succeed?
Well, first of all, the question I would ask is he qualified to serve as president? And the answer is yes. He's a smart man. He understands conservative policies. He understands how the White House works and how the U.S. government works. Is he the best candidate? I don't know. I haven't viewed him through the lens of a president, but I will have that opportunity in the coming year as he begins campaigning. And he said publicly that he was considering running, and so we'll wait to see what happens.
Let me just ask you finally, if the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, takes on Donald Trump, who wins?
I think today's DeSantis wins.
He wins even though a lot of people will claim that he does not have the base or the national appeal that Donald Trump has?
I think today, if the vote were taken today, I think DeSantis wins. That could change, as I said earlier in the program.
And do you believe Republicans can win without Trump?
Without question, they can win without Trump. The Republican Party is a very, very old party, and it's survived a lot of transformative figures, if you will, and Trump is just one more transformative figure.
All right, we shall see. Ambassador Gordon Sondland, a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the underperformance of Republicans in the midterm election, particularly Trump-endorsed candidates, has accelerated a power struggle between the former president and the re-elected governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, once a staunch Trump ally whose landslide victory has shifted the dynamics within the party. According to recent polls, more Republican voters say they would rather see the governor of Florida, DeSantis, as their party's nominee for president in 2024 than Donald Trump. So how would a potential Trump versus DeSantis election battle play out? My next guest, Joe Walsh, ran as a Republican presidential candidate in 2020 against Donald Trump. He's a former member of the House of Representatives and joins me now. Joe Walsh, you ran against Donald Trump in 2020 for the Republican Party's nomination. That was before you decided to leave the party and actually vote for Joe Biden, a Democrat. The GOP today is in a tough position. Can it abandon Trump? Is the party ready to move on? And perhaps more importantly, is it ready to move away from his base?
Always good to be with you. Look, my former political party cut a deal with the devil 6 years ago. And I don't think you can't get out of a deal with the devil. They sold their souls, all these Republicans did, to Donald Trump. He's not going to let them have their souls back. I think they can't win with him, and I think they can't win without him. I think more and more Republicans are realizing that, but it's too late.
So is the party doomed? I mean, what is the alternative then?
I think the Republican Party is a shrinking, dying national party. You know, Trump's not the problem. The problem is Trumpism. It's a party of old white men and old white women. Old white men and old white women tend to die eventually. And I don't see the party replacing these people with young voters or voters of color. So I do think this party is dying as a national party. Trump's kind of like the last dying gasp.
And we know from the polls in the midterms that at least 63% of young voters, the Generation Z, Gen Z voters, decided to elect Democratic candidates. They're not buying what the Republican Party is giving them. They're not buying into the election denial, into the extremism, into a lot of things that the Republicans have to offer today.
Spot on. Young voters want nothing to do with what my party has become. And let's be real, what has it become? It's a cruel party. It's an intolerant party. It's a party that increasingly no longer believes in democracy, and they want America to be some sort of Christian theocracy. That's not going to play with most Americans, and that's not at all going to play with young people.
Then how viable a candidate would the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, be? Because for many Republicans, he is today perhaps the new front runner. But you talk about the cruelty of the party. He's a governor who bussed migrants to Democratic states. He is someone who is playing on the Trump base, the Christian nationalism that many people would say is so close to white supremacy as well. In what direction would he take the party? How much further to the right can the party go?
Now, he'd continue to take it in the direction it is. DeSantis is just Trump without any charisma. If Trump isn't the nominee in 24, the Republican Party nominee will have to be Trumpy, because this is no longer just Trump, it's Trumpism. It is a party that no longer believes in truth. It's a party that wants to build a wall around America. And you and I have talked, it's a party that wants to make America a Christian theocracy, this nationalist stuff. DeSantis epitomizes that. And I'll tell you what, if you want to be a viable Republican today, you have to epitomize that.
And so presumably if he does epitomize that, he would do well with a considerable chunk of the Republican electorate.
DeSantis is the lead figure because most of DeSantis's support is coming from Trump people who love Trump, but they don't think Trump can win. So they look at DeSantis and they say, oh, he's just like Trump, but he can win. But you know what? I know Ron DeSantis. DeSantis isn't ready for a national stage. If Trump isn't in the picture in a year, there will be a number of Republicans running for the nomination.
A number of Republicans, but who is the most likely candidate? And what happens if the party splinters and if Trump decides to form his own party, or if he even runs as an independent? If you say that the party cannot win with him, cannot win without him.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Let's be real. If Trump's not the nominee, like if the Republican Party says we want nothing to do with you, Donald Trump will burn the Republican Party to the ground. He will take and 30% of Republican voters are Trump cult members. If Trump leaves, that 30% goes with him. And no Republican nominee in 24 can win without that hardcore 30%. This is why Trump's got the Republican Party by the short hairs. Trump doesn't care about the Republican Party. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. But they can't win without him either. This is the bind they've put themselves in.
And the few Republicans on the Hill who decided to take on Trump were booted out of the party. There simply is no space for them.
I realized 2 years ago there's no place in the party for me. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, they're Republicans still, but they both know there's no room in this party for them. So, and there are a lot of conservatives like us who will just have left or will keep leaving. And right now it's a weird thing because I'm a conservative, but I'm helping to get Democrats elected because I'm on team democracy.
And you're not the only one who's doing that. Liz Cheney and others
Yes.
are helping Democrats as well. But interestingly, you were an early supporter of Trump when he ran for president back in 2016. Then in 2018, you called him, quote, a danger to the country. You said you would never support him again. You even suggested using the 25th Amendment to remove him from office. But isn't a big part of the problem today that too many in the party enabled him for so long?
Republicans created this monster, and that's what Donald Trump is. He's an anti-democracy monster. But Republicans fed him, they petted him, they worshiped him. As you said, they enabled him for 5 or 6 years. Look at Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence. A couple days ago, he was asked directly, do you think Donald Trump should be president again? And even now, Pence doesn't have the courage to say no. This is all on them. They brought this on themselves. Sadly, they deserve everything Trump does to them.
Mike Pence conveniently said it was up to the American voters to decide. But voters rejected the far-right falsehood about the 2020 election. How confident should Democrats be going into the next presidential election, given the mess the Republican Party is in?
Democrats shouldn't be confident because whether the nominee is Trump, DeSantis, or whoever, let's be real. There's a decent chance Donald Trump could get elected president again. Think about that. A criminal, a traitor. Donald Trump could become president again. Democrats dodged a bullet in these midterms. The abortion ruling energized their voters, and Donald Trump energized their voters. Democrats need to do some real self-reflecting so that they can do better in 24.
Former Congressman, former 2020 Republican presidential candidate, Joe Walsh. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Always good to be with you. Thank you.
Against all odds, and in a reversal of recent trends, these midterm elections yielded a rare outcome, not seen in 20 years for any party in the White House. Democrats can now breathe a sigh of relief as the Republican red wave was not to be. They will retain control of the Senate, and even if the House of Representatives is controlled by Republicans when all the ballots are counted, it will be by the slimmest of majorities, so slim that it could even be insufficient to guarantee party discipline within a severely fractured GOP. A party with two diverging groups of electors, and for now at least, one contested leader. A party Donald Trump could even splinter were he to decide to form his own MAGA party, or perhaps even the Trump party. Democrats for now can be overjoyed with their scorecard and double success at the midterms against the backdrop of high inflation and rising interest rates. Firstly, with the defeat of most Trump loyalists and election deniers, and secondly, with the former president remaining true to form, combative and bombastic despite the dismal showing of the Trump brand, a brand that is deepening the rift within the Republican Party between Trump diehard supporters and other conservative voters. And so in short, as long as Trump remains in the game and runs to clinch the 2024 Republican Party nomination, Democrats will rejoice by watching the Republican feud. Trump may be their best joker card to keep the White House in 2 years, because if these midterms have shown anything, it is that the Trump phenomenon is facing a wall. Not the one candidate Trump promised along the US-Mexico border, but the wall he himself erected single-handedly between his devout loyalists and other Republicans. While it is always risky to predict US elections, it may be safe to suggest for now that the grand old party's odds to win the White House with Trump appear slim. Without Trump, they could be even slimmer. That's all for this week from me, Ghida Fakhry, and the team. Thanks for watching.